Good afternoon, everyone. It's 1 p.m. and time for today's council meeting. I'm going to call it to order by just announcing that we're missing two councillors this afternoon. We have regrets from both Councillor Bartley and Councillor Forder, and we do have quorum, however. And I think we'll begin the meeting by calling on Councillor Greenfield to read our land acknowledgement.
Thank you, Mayor Kentner, and yes, good afternoon, everyone. We would like to begin by acknowledging that we're meeting on the traditional lands and treaty territory of the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, which includes the Chippewas of Nawash Unceded First Nation and the Chippewas of Saugeen First Nation. We also recognize the Métis, whose ancestors shared this land and these waters. We extend our gratitude to all Anishinaabe and Métis people and their descendants, past, present, and future, who continue to care for and inhabit these lands and tend to these waters.
Thank you, Councillor. And I'll just ask you to join me in a moment of silent reflection on our business today. Thank you. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, just a reminder to bring it forward if and when it occurs to you. And announcements. Do we have some announcements? Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor Kentner, and good afternoon, everyone. We did mention this at a past meeting, but I wanted to remind everyone that the coldest night of the year is upcoming on February 22nd. And this is an event with Rotary House, the Rotary Club of Meaford, and the United Way of, and we encourage everyone to go on to the website. You can just Google coldest night of the year and sign up and donate or sign up to walk. And you're to meet at Rotary House at 4:30 for some stretches, and there'll be some short speeches at 5, and we walk at 5:15 and then come back to a Rotary House for some refreshments. And the proceeds all go to combat hunger and homelessness in our communities. So do try and come out for coldest night of the year. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Greenfield?
Thanks, Mayor Kentner. This is not particularly a municipality of Meaford announcement, but a number of individuals have been asking me about candidates meetings in our area. And thus far, I can't find anything really local, but I did want to mention the Ontario Federation of Agriculture is putting on an all candidates debate February 19th. That's a Wednesday, I believe, 7 p.m. at the Katy Community Center. It's a bit of a drive away, but I'm sure it would be an interesting evening. And the only other one that I have heard about is February 24th at the Harmony Center in Owen Sound. So if I get any further updates of anything closer, I'll try and get that broadcast. Thanks.
If I may, I'll just interject here. There is a meeting tonight in Durham. I think it's at the Durham Legion, and this deals with the healthcare file. And I think a very important meeting for our riding and for all of Ontario. So that's tonight. I can't tell you exactly what time, but I'm sure you'll find it online. And it's probably not the night to drive to Durham and back, but if you or anyone watching is interested, especially in that file, the meeting tonight is devoted to that topic. Councillor Yurg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, not an announcement. I'm going to make a comment about a recent event. So I think many of us attended yesterday's Green Party event. I just wanted to comment that under the guise of democracy, what a great event it was. The fact that we had a party leader here in Meaford was really, really good. Anybody attended, I thought it was well done. So I'm just going to give props to Save Georgian Bay, who organized it and did end up getting Mike Schreiner here. And it would certainly be nice to see that kind of, more of that kind of thing in Meaford, because it really did provide public opportunity to ask some very good questions. So it was well done.
Councillor Bell?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and welcome everyone to the council chambers, those of you who have come out today. My announcement today is about Canada's Agricultural Day, to celebrate that right here in our own municipality. It's February the 11th, that's tomorrow. And here our agricultural community has a lot of very hardworking farmers who sustain us. And according to the 2021 census, our municipality is home to a very diverse and vital farming sector. And they include 40 oilseed and grain farmers, 43 hay farmers, 203 cattle ranches, 47 fruit tree farmers, 19 dairy farmers. These farms are the backbone of our local economy, and they play a crucial role in feeding communities across the country. And today we recognize their dedication, their resilience, and the invaluable contributions to Canada's agricultural industry. I have something here also, a quick snapshot from the Ontario Federation of Agriculture, a little broader than our municipality. It's Grey County. And Grey County has about 2,200 farms, and the average size of a farm is about 206 acres. The top three are cattle, grain oils, and dairy. Another interesting statistic that was gathered is that 32% of the farm operators are female. And finally, just a quick note about the entire province of Ontario. Ontario is a very, very large land mass. We're all aware of that. But one statistic that maybe a lot of people might not know is that only 5% is actually production able land. So when we do have things that come up about planning and expansion, the statistic that we had back in 2022 was that we're losing about 320 acres a day. And that's very significant. But all in all, I just wanted to bring to our attention today that the agricultural sector right here, right in our municipality, is very vital to the total overall economy of what folks do right here.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. I have one here, and then I'll turn it over to the other side of the horseshoe. Bogner's second annual Family Day, Winter Embrace 2025, is just 1 week away. So join us on Monday, February 17th from 1 until 3 in the afternoon at the Bogner Community Center for a family-friendly winter celebration with games. Val, do you have an announcement?
I have a couple. First one is the job fair that's coming up this month. The municipality will be attending the Grey County Regional Job Fair on February 20th from 2 till 7 at the Bayshore Community Center in Owen Sound. Municipal staff will be available to discuss current and upcoming employment prospects with those interested in serving our community. The other one I'd like to bring up is from last meeting. We have new staff members, and our new staff member that's here with us today is our new planner in the planning department. And I'd just like you to meet Michael Kelly.
Welcome, Michael.
That's all for me.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to public participation. Members of the public are encouraged to provide council with their comments and questions. Presentations must be prearranged with legislative services before the agenda is released and are limited to 10 minutes. If a member of the public wishes to make a deputation on items on the council agenda or to ask a public question of council, they may do so either in person at the chambers or remotely via Zoom. Members of the public wishing to make a deputation or to ask a public question must register in advance with legislative services by 10 in the morning on the day of the meeting. And you can do that by contacting clerk@meaford.ca or calling 519-538-1060, extension 1110. An email with access information will be sent to those who register for remote participation. Deputations are limited to 5 minutes and public questions to 2 minutes. And just a reminder that the public can watch this meeting live via the Municipality of Meaford's YouTube channel, www.meaford.ca/YouTube. We actually have 3 presentations this afternoon, so I'm going to remind our visitors of the 10-minute presentation time, and we always like to ask some pertinent questions. So if you can try and I know these are long presentations on screen, and they are, I think all councillors will have read them, and they're certainly available to members of the public as well by going to the agenda online. So first, I'm going to call on Liz Buckton, Senior Policy Planner for Grey County, and Marilyn Struthers of the Institute of Southern Georgian Bay. They're going to be speaking to us on municipal housing development. Sorry, they're speaking on affordable housing. And you got the mic on there for them? Great.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting us. Liz, Liz and I have been working almost as a dog and pony show, I think, with a couple of municipal deputations, and it's timely for us. Excuse me. We're presenting on behalf of the Social Finance, Housing and Learning Group of the Institute of South Georgian Bay. That's probably not new for many of the people in the room here. The Institute is an NGO that fosters community conversation on key issues. And over the last 2.5, 3 years, our volunteer group has been focused on the housing crisis and how it actually is manifesting here in our communities. We've been asking, what can we do locally to fill the affordable housing gap in our local housing supply? And I think there's lots of sense the feds should do something or the province should do something. We're saying good luck with that. Let's figure it out for ourselves, at least as far as we can. We're not alone in this. There are communities that we've linked up with all over Ontario and over Canada that are working on local solutions, and we've been learning on side. Shirley's asked us to speak to what Meaford can do, and we're delighted to help out with that. You'll have in your package a document that Liz has just rewritten for us on what municipalities can do. But we'll talk about some of those things as well. Just a bit of national data, if I can make this work, yes, to set the scene. Our first step really was to try and figure out, so why is this happening and why is it happening here? But you can see nationally in that slide to your left, that the red is income and the green is the growth, sorry, vice versa. The red is the growth in housing costs and the green is the growth in income. Can you tell I'm slightly dyslexic? I got the right fingers on the right button. The Bank of Canada tells us housing affordability is the worst that it's been in 41 years. And for those, with a deep concern for homelessness, this is a manifestation of the housing crisis. It's not entirely a separate issue. The Canadian Alliance for Homelessness tells us that 85% of the people on our streets are here because they cannot afford rent. So you can see the pattern. Grey County calculates our housing deficit. Almost 80% of that deficit is in the affordability range of lower and median income households. And as working people are struggling to meet housing costs, the county wait list for subsidized housing has grown 253% between 2021 and March of last year. And you see the other kinds of indicators. So at this point, we are looking at our workforce who can't be housed without subsidy. And that's not at all a way for a community to be sustainable. It isn't just Meaford, it's all of us here. So this has sort of been our pathway over the 3 years. We're all volunteers. We set out to figure out what this was about and what we could do. I think it was Yvonne Hamlin, who's of course now mayor of Collingwood, who said, well, okay, when do we put a shovel in the ground? And we learned pretty quickly that it's not a shovel shortage problem. It is actually something that's gone wrong in our housing development and our financial systems. So the project became, what are the systems changes that our communities can make, we can do ourselves, that will create more affordable housing for the people who live and work here. So we've documented our journey. There is a toolkit up on the Institute's website. They're very generous in putting workshop tapes, videos, and so on. It's all there. And as some of you may know, a year ago in Meaford, we hosted our housing forum in your beautiful town hall. And some of you were part of the deeper dive workshop, where we essentially said, if we were 10 times bolder and more collaborative about affordable housing, what would we be doing? So that report came to your council in the spring. And in November, we released a collaborative strategy calling for 3 parts, a strategy for smart deployment of mostly existing local resources to increase access to affordable workforce housing in our region. So to understand affordability, which is something Shirley asked us to focus on, this is CMHC's housing spectrum. So if you look at the left-hand side of the scale, that's where subsidized housing is, where costs are supported by tax dollars for those with very low income and a traditional social welfare role. At the far right is the commercial market, where a number of our communities have really seen a lot of lucrative investor activity over the last couple of years. That middle band of affordable rental and home ownership is where the crisis is here, and it is in much of Canada. To learn more, we focused on affordability for 3 employment sectors. We pulled them out as, not wealthy folks. So we looked at healthcare and senior care, we looked at retail, and we looked at hospitality and tourism. And I think it's important now for Meaford to be thinking about construction and building, given some of the recent announcements. Many of these workers live in lower income rental, which are historically in short supply. Not speaking about subsidized rental, lower income rental. Shortages in that market across Canada are driving up costs, leaving some families to choose between rent and food, and really putting a hard stop on savings for eventual home purposes. The Canadian provincial standard of affordability is 30% of gross income, and that is what we recommend all municipalities are looking at and understanding the data in your community, what that actually means in terms of your development priorities. Pre-pandemic, Canadians spent 35% of pre-tax on income, pre-tax income on housing. But a year ago, BMO put that national figure at 50%. That's a 20% less to spend in local economies. So what does it look like in Meaford? Liz.
Thanks, Marilyn. So do you mind just going there to that? Thank you very much. To the next slide. So I'm just going to be very brief, and I know you've had these numbers and a chance to look at it. So I just pulled out some of the data for Meaford that we have available to us at the county, and I just wanted to highlight the median household income. So for the municipality of Meaford, that's $79,500 per year based on the last census. Excuse me. And as a median income, what that means is that half of households have a household income less than that figure. So, I think if you look at the median, a rent of $19.88 a month, meeting the 30%, that would be affordable to a household at median income. But for that half of households earning less than that, that would be above that 30% standard, so unaffordable by that definition. And I think if you compare that then to minimum wage, and we've just kind of identified the housing costs that would go with a minimum wage for all, it's very clear, right, that we would have a population that is working in our community, looking to access housing, but looking for rentals that are in around that $800 to $900 a month price point, which is just not available currently on the market. So some data there, and I know we've had a prior conversation about data, and I'm always happy to talk about data. So if you want more, but certainly I can bring that. But really, we just wanted to anchor kind of price point in your minds when we talk about affordable. What are we talking about? And it's in that $800 to $900 range for that workforce at the lower side. So back to Marilyn. We're going to move real quick.
We're moving real quick. All right. So the problem. Market builders are telling us they can't build to the threshold of affordability that we need. Our municipalities don't have data or much in the way of housing plans to focus development decisions on the kind of housing that we need. And you can read the rest. So what's the solution? Whether you're concerned with homelessness or builders or PSWs, we have to increase our supply of lower cost housing and particularly lower cost rental. So through our conversations, we are now setting out 3 elements of the solution. Building straight from the deeper dive report, we could, as a region, support the capacity of our non-market and near-market developers, and I'm going to explain to you exactly what they are. We could adapt our municipal development practices so that we're actually placing a priority on affordable development and community need. June Porter, who's a Town of Blue Mountains councillor and a member of our group, had a lovely image of every planning department looking at you, having a whiteboard with the data on it and measuring your development decisions against the requirements of your community. And finally, new sources of capital. Accessing capital for affordable right now is really hard. So there's three terms here that I will explain. Non-market housing are the nonprofits, co-ops, churches, charities, and legions that traditionally all over Ontario have always leveraged local assets to build affordable housing. We include in that now social enterprise, or what we might call near market developers. And those are the folks who may be doing commercial development. I know Loon Call is an example here in Meaford, but are committed to an affordability standard. A number of these community organizations across Canada actually are collaborating on scale and starting to use the tools that developers are using.
I'm just going to tell you, you're at 10 minutes now.
I am. Okay. Thank you. Municipal development practices. We've got the key strategies there. Setting affordable development targets based on income. And foster a social finance strategy. And I'm going to spend the last of my minutes here. The business sectors has certain kinds of income. Charitable nonprofit sector has certain kinds of income. Governments have certain kinds of income. The development of social finance right now is creating a whole new asset class to support affordability, and it's being used all over Canada. Tapestry Capital has $111 million worth of community bonds out right now to support affordable housing communities building. So here's the plan, this whole community approach. You've had a chance to read it. And what we will be doing over the next year or so is building out both the community and the county and municipality sides. And just imagine if we had a community of practice of non-market developers so that they're learning from one another. We started that. Phil was part of that. What if we had regional citizens groups? We have them in a number of communities, not one in Meaford. We'd love to have one in Meaford. A regional community wealth strategy and a land trust, a trusted nonprofit partner to look at what we do with surplus lands. And then on the municipal side, some way to share experience. We look across municipalities so we can see quite a range of development experience. Be good to be able to share more of that. A regional communications campaign and participation in social finance. One of the things that we've learned from other communities is when people buy community bonds to support affordable housing, it really increases engagement and it cuts down on NIMBYism.
I don't want to cut this last bit short. I know that we're at time, so maybe just speak to the fact that as the county will come back with some additional or share some additional information here. We're just getting into the growth management strategy work. We've retained a consultant. We awarded that last week. So we'll be back in touch with respect to some data and that we'll be looking for to help us with that update process. And then we will be doing some additional data work this year around growth allocations, workforce housing needs, and leading into kind of the broader strategies around housing that we need to look at. And if okay with you, I'll maybe just I'll flip. Oh dear, I hit the wrong button there, definitely. So as Marilyn said, right, the community side will be building out a number of things. I encourage you to take a look through that slide. And then I just wanted to just say here, and this is what Marilyn had mentioned. I'll get it. We've sent along a handout to Alex. And so we're going to give it in paper format, but there's a lot of links in there, some useful information. So just would encourage you to take a look through that handout when she shares that. Thanks, Phil. With those links, they take you off to the toolkit, they take you off to data, and it really includes just a list of low-hanging fruit all the way up to full-scale housing investment options that the municipality could consider in choosing a menu of how you'd like to address this issue locally. So Marilyn, I think maybe we leave it there. That is the short version of the Dog and Pony Show, and we're certainly happy for any questions.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I just want to begin by thanking Liz, yourself, and Marilyn for coming to present to us today. And I feel badly that you've been rushed through this presentation because there is so much important information here. So I do encourage everyone to go back and have another read through the slides. And I just really want to acknowledge Marilyn, who is now sought out nationwide for her expertise on the social net finance side of affordable housing. So we're really fortunate to have Marilyn in our community. I did have a couple of questions, though, if I may. First of all, we are in Meaford looking at our CIP plan. And I'm just wondering, don't want to put you on the spot, Liz, but at when we get a chance to really dive into that, if there might be any initiatives that could be suggested or recommended from the social finance group or from the county level, that might be helpful to us as we look at how we can encourage developers to take advantage of any of those opportunities to build affordable in Meaford. And my other question for you is, you said a dog and pony show, you're going around and speaking to other councils. So what are you hearing from other communities, and what are they doing that, we might learn from here in Meaford? I know you mentioned potentially a citizens group or a regional group. Is that the best place for us, in your opinion, to get started?
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Deputy Mayor, for those questions. So I think maybe I'll speak just briefly to the CIP question that you mentioned, and then call on Marilyn to help us with that second question. So with respect to the community improvement plans, they're a really powerful tool, right? They allow us to do things outside of kind of the normal municipal finance framework. All very transparent and laid out and accountable, but it does allow us to incentivize the various different types of housing in different ways. I think what we've been seeing is that some municipalities have come forward and rolled out housing focused CIPs. So Town of Blue Mountains, for example, they've recently done a housing focused CIP. I could find you a few other examples, but they do exist in our region and around our region. And oftentimes, I don't think they're recreating the wheel necessarily in terms of what those programs offer. The CIP framework kind of sets out some standard ones. But I think the important thing to consider with the CIP tool is just to try and scale the incentives to the types of development that you're trying to incent. And what we're hearing is that kind of the very small fee or equivalent grants may not be the ones that move the needle in terms of an affordable housing project where you're talking costs of maybe $300,000 or $400,000 a unit. But the tax incremental equivalent grants, for example, are pretty powerful, and they're at that right scale. Land transfers and discounted land would be another example of an initiative that would be scaled appropriately to help incent those affordable housing projects. So certainly lots of information we can pull in, but I do think it's maybe more about the lens that we're looking through with those CIPs, just to make sure those programs are targeted to the types of development that we'd like. Okay, and with respect to that, what are others doing? I think there's very formal ways to address it, and we've seen that in some cases. I'll just highlight, for example, Blue Mountains had just come forward with a staff report on February 4th, kind of outlining their work plan around the housing portfolio for 25 and 26. And I think it's similar to the project charter that was done here previously around the housing portfolio too, kind of itemizing some of the tasks that staff would be running with. So that's one way, right? Formalizing it in terms of work plans. But I think there's lots of other ways people are engaging, and I don't know, Marilyn, what comes to mind for you around that, but please feel free.
Just quickly, we've ended up with a collaborative strategy with municipalities on one side and community on the other, because there's different things that each can do. And so where we've had, or where we're seeing the most success is when there is some kind of table in a community that is, from a citizen's side, focused on affordable housing, what that means, what the possibilities are, what the non-market, near market folks might be doing, and just how the municipality can incentivize the kind of housing that you actually need. So that takes place in a lot of different ways. Collingwood's probably one of the most interesting places to look. They are 5 years into a municipally created task force on housing. And, you know, when I listen to the citizen side of that talk about the work, they're saying, we don't have any difficulty with our council. They understand, we've built the understanding together. We know what needs to happen, and both sides are working out how it gets done. They've done some interesting things, like just recently an RFP for a non-market housing developer. They don't have one, so have welcomed 2 new individuals into their community that have expertise in housing and are building a nonprofit housing organization. They have also kept a fund, I believe Grey Highlands is looking at this as well, a fund that they can make grants to non-market housing or organizations that are thinking about doing this. In Grey Highlands, there's an organization called, now they've just changed it from A-High to A-High. I can't explain that. But they're looking at 3 sites where they would build as a non-market for affordable housing. They have to learn how to do that, where a municipality can help fund the capacity building there, development studies, pre-development studies, that sort of thing, or even just make good linkages. That's important. Southgate had a housing task force, nixed it. The community kept going. They're part of our group, and I understand they're going to reinstate that housing task force. Owen Sound has a quiet little group working in the background, convening, and is part of something called a Community Solutions Conference in Owen Sound I think it's in March. So there are lots of ways that partnership between municipality and county and citizens can work. And part of what it does is take the temperature down around the issues of homelessness and increasing tax-based social services. Thank you.
Councillor Greenfield, did I see your hand up? Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, ladies, for your presentation. I start out by saying I think everyone is aware of the housing, the affordable housing problems. I read your report. The year 1984 jumped out at me. It was about 1984 that I was working for a general contractor on, he was building two-story duplexes over in Owen Sound. And again, this is early 80s. And this general contractor, I always remember, he told me then, he said, this is the last affordable housing I'll ever build. I can't afford to build structures like this. Now, these were two-story duplexes, considerable structures. That was 40 years ago. Then I look at your graph and I see where the average income in the last 40 years has doubled. The average price of a house is 9 times 900%, right? And I don't doubt your graph. I expect it's paying on. I wish I had some answers to this. I know we can we can't just give up on this. We gotta keep working on it. But I look at Great County, and Liz can correct me on this. I think Great County has about a population of maybe 175,000. Is that close, Liz?
I think it's 109, 15. So I haven't seen the latest numbers, but I want to say it was less than 120. But yeah, we're over 100.
I often compare the population of Gray to the population of the city of Barrie. Barrie's got more people than we have, one city. I just, again, we can't give up on this, but, I'm not sure. A convincing answer is gonna be very difficult to come up with. And, I like your suggestions. We have to keep working at it, but, oh, the other thing I wanted to mention, back in the early 1980s, interest rates were 15, 16%. People were building back then. Now we've got interest rates at 2 and 3%, and I wish I could figure out the picture. I'm sorry.
If I
Councillor
may
Bell?
respond to that just very briefly. With your permission?
Oh, sorry, yeah, I didn't hear that. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. You've really summarized the dilemmas that we've been sitting with for 3 years really very well. And the solution, we think, is that we are together a decent sized municipality. And so if we work collaboratively across municipalities, we should be able to gain the scale we need to do the kind of development that we require. But if it's non-market development, the other problem is that nonprofits rurally have about 80% of the revenue of urban, right? So we need to really have our municipalities supporting that non-market structure in order to make it work. And we need to do the same thing. We've got a tremendously powerful thing here. We can make independent decisions on each municipality in terms of development. But if we do that collectively across a framework that puts a priority on affordability and we understand what that means, we can move it. We can move the needle. If we work one by each, it's going to be tough.
Councillor Bell?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. And thanks for your presentation to keep these matters before us. I want to talk about your artwork that you actually had. As a tool maker, I was pretty intrigued with that because you showed 5 lug gears working with multi-pointed sprockets. Now, actually, your artwork really is a representative of the problem. How does a sprocket work with a gear? They don't mesh, and you have a disconnect. And that's what you've been presenting today. Now, I don't know whether there was conscious thought on that when you designed that, or whether you just presented it to be, we're working together and there's a bunch of gears here. But I thought from my aspect, really your artwork put it to the point that there is a disconnect. I would like to suggest that we have heard some stats today. I didn't know that in our municipality, we had about 20% of the households renting. Also, you know, if you're making $20 an hour and working a full week, you're making 42 grand a year. It takes 2 of you in the household to hit that 80 grand. So if you're on your own and you're making $20 an hour, that $2,000, that $2,500 is getting ate up pretty hard. It's one of the things that I think about when we're going through the budget. There are people out there that really every dollar that we assess them, it does hit them hard. They feel it harder than maybe those that have more affluence of capital. I'd like to leave you with this. I've always wanted to entertain alternative forms of housing. I know that people, for the most part, they have a degree of personal pride. They would love nothing better than to put the key in a door of a place that they say is mine. I want them to have that. And I think we need to think way outside the box of what it means to have something created that is theirs, that they own, that they can modify and decorate, do it because it's theirs. We find a huge, huge psychological difference to our people here and everywhere. And I'll leave you with this. I'm a baby boomer. A lot of us are baby boomers. We're cashing out in different ways, not just financially with our investment portfolio. There will come a day, 15, 20 years from now, there will be a lot of homes that will be available. We just won't be around. So right now, the baby boomers are the biggest group. And even the baby boomers, the support system that's behind us, my children, that demographics, there's not as many of them as there are of us. And so your gears and your sprockets and your connectivity and your disconnect, it's an issue which is multi-complicated, but your last words that you said about working together, that's all we can do. So thank you.
Thank you for
your
that.
presentation.
I want to I have kids. I'm a baby boomer. I have grandkids. My grandkids worked in a long-term care facility in Owen Sound, and you know the difficulties there. They looked at the long-term care facility in Meaford and said, we'd like to work there. We calculated that it would cost them 60% more to relocate from their existing rental where they're grandfathered in to Meaford. So we no longer have a mobile workforce.
Councillor Urick, and then we're going to have to move on.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'll echo Deputy Mayor's comments. Thank you, Liz and Marilyn, for the Herculean work you do. It's really appreciated. Councillor Ford couldn't be here today, and he did actually, if you looked at the presentation, while he forwarded a couple of questions, one of which I'll piggyback on. It was interesting. I mentioned yesterday that there was the Green Party was in town. And what they were talking about was, for some reason, our premier is really against fourplexes, sixplexes. Can't really figure out why, because in small communities or even large urban centers, they've been, such a mainstay of that type of housing. And you look at what our own Rotary Club does with affordable housing in town, and trying to get altruistic entities to try to build those smaller centers that they might be able to afford, as opposed to building 200, home developments. So his question is, one of them was, what zoning bylaw amendments could increase density and support affordable housing projects? And does Meaford have available land or properties that could be designated for affordable housing?
What a great question. Thank you so much for that. So there's lots of ways through the zoning bylaw we can get at that, right? And I think there has been the general push towards infill intensification because it makes really good sense from an infrastructure perspective also, right? It's a big bang for our buck and a big bang for the builder's buck if they're doing that infill type of development. So that would be one of the things, right? Looking at that density, looking at those opportunities for where you might want to place that increased density. I know that's something that might come with increased height as well. And I know that that's a hot button issue in a lot of our communities. So, I'll highlight that. I don't know where the minds around the council table rest with respect to that issue, but that is what we are hearing from the development community as a number one opportunity to look at the cost factors that they're dealing with. And then I think in terms of those other lands, yes. So I think there are some parcels of land that Meaford may own. I'm not necessarily talking about flat level, completely unoccupied parcels though. And so I think one of the things that we've been talking about is, at this stage of the game, a lot of the flat, level, green field parcels in our communities. They've been developed already, right? The easy stuff is gone. But is there the opportunity, and I know Collingwood will be going through this exercise this year, to look at those parcels that are underutilized? And so if you look down in Guelph, Kitchener-Waterloo area, they've been going through a discussion around units on top of parking, right? So where there's a parking lot or facility, does that realize some opportunities if we look at the airspace above those, or fairgrounds, along the peripheries of fairgrounds, or that little pocket of land that is on the works yard but isn't quite being used for works things, like looking at those opportunities to get the land that's already working for us to work a little bit harder for us is one of the things that we're seeing there as well. So yeah, lots of opportunity, but I think, and to Councillor Bell's point, it's just getting our heads out of the mindset that it's a straightforward development as usual kind of situation. It's more about that creative, scrappy, rural nature of how do we make it work for us with the resources we have. So set that there. Thank you.
Thank you again.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to ask our next presenter, Daniel Siegel of Municipal Housing Development. He's going to join us virtually. Are you there, sir? Do we have him? Okay.
Hello.
Hello, Daniel. Go ahead.
Can you see me? I guess I'm just talking. Yeah, no, thanks for inviting me to council this afternoon. Super presentation just before me, and I'm pretty much gonna just jump right off of my presentation and continue based on the previous delegate's presentation, because she did a great job of defining the issues, and I'm going to continue, but really dive into solutions and I guess challenges. The previous presenter talked about working together, and I think what this means on a very practical level is that attainable housing development is not a financially sustainable enterprise for the private sector. And we've seen that by what they've been able to bring to market. And then once we get over that, the question is, how does a developer such as myself work with a municipality and a community land trust to bring attainable units to the market and do so sustainably, financially responsibly, and in a way that could be replicated time and time again. So Bill 23 came out, and so my figures are based on the attainable detached purchase price of a house in Meaford, which is $341,000 roughly. Now, that number needs to include three elements. It needs to include the actual house, it needs to include the land, and it needs to include the zoning changes to allow it. So that's permits, development charges, infrastructure. And frankly, there's not enough meat on the bone for a developer like myself to take this on. The raw costs of a 2-bedroom, 1-bath prefabricated build is about $250,000. And when you factor in, you need to acquire the land, service the land, and do all the other things, it's impossible to come out with your shirt if you take on these projects. I believe the councillor mentioned that in his anecdote about the house from the 1980s, the duplex, that was the last one being built. It's likely the last one being built because the guy was losing his shirt as he was building that duplex. So the way that this works is when well, first of all, I just want to point out that the CMHC doesn't have a single attainable ownership funding model. They're all rent-based. And I think that that's probably because attainable home ownership doesn't work unless we're able to work with some of these costs. And so my first solution is, how do you sell an attainable house at or below $341,000 in Meaford? The answer is simple. You sell them only the house. The land is owned by the municipality, and you sell it with a land lease of 99 years. And then the community land trust or co-op, depending on how you want to do it, manages that land. I've done this presentation about somewhere between 70 and 80 times across Ontario. And frankly, the commitment from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing to enable housing in this province is non-existent. If you compare that to what's going on in BC, attainable housing is managed at the provincial level, not through 42 district service managers. And, this was addressed by the other counselor who was mentioning how does a sprocket and a gear work together? Well, that's what you get when you get 42 regional district service managers offering attainable housing across the province. It has to be centralized. We have an Ontario building code. We should have an Ontario Municipal Development Corporation, and that the money for attainable housing should come from municipal debentures. It shouldn't be coming from property taxes. It doesn't make any sense. And I've advocated for this before, but provincially or municipally, there's municipal debt covenants that say that no more than 25% of debt could be used for could be taken out at a municipal level, and that debt generally relates to leases on cars and trucks and other things, and there's very little room for housing. So frankly, housing creation across the province cannot be borne solely through the debt ratings of a municipality. That's not going to happen, and that's why we haven't seen any growth on the needle here. But the first solution is, if you wanted to go to your CIP and make some changes, make it so that somebody who builds an ADU in their backyard could sever the lot and sell it off separately. In 2025, access to proper places to build is next to impossible. All the best land is already owned by somebody else. Municipalities don't have it across the province. And developers who bought it 20 years ago are valuing the land at millions of dollars. And if you're trying to put a subdivision of attainable homes at $341,000, there's no room in that pro forma to allow for land purchase. And so your best option is infill. And the last thing we want to do when we are doing our CIP is telling homeowners, well, you could build a house behind your house, but now you have to become a landlord when you've had no experience in doing that. So again, you have to apologize. My presentation, I'm really going off script here because I felt like the presenter right before me did a great job of showing the issues and didn't really come with tangible solutions. I feel like I have the solutions, but frankly, the levels of government aren't interested in supporting the solutions that really work. You could look to south of the border, our neighbors in the States, to see how they've addressed attainable housing, and it's done through municipal development of housing. They could prepare lots, sell them as builder lots, or even sell them with a house on them as well. You can see from my last slide here, I'm an ADU builder in Toronto and Hamilton. I have a lot of experience building prefabricated units that go in people's backyard. I know that very well, and this is the solution. These types of houses have 10% IRRs. It's the smart way to build in 2025. It's taken off south of the border. North of the border, this is more of an issue as a result of higher interest rates. I think people could now borrow at probably in the mid 4s to high 5s with an A lender, and then B lender, you're at 10%. And recently the CMHC came out with an $80,000 2% loan to build ADUs. And I don't think that subdivisions of attainable housing can be done without support from a municipality who's interested in doing a land lease, a community land trust willing to maintain the affordability of these units, and a developer such as myself willing to build attainable houses at a price that makes sense. Fundamentally, there's a disconnect in the supply chain here. The incentives are not aligned. Municipalities are not interested in taking on risks related to development. And without that there's no reason why a developer like myself would take on that risk when there isn't a potential reward. So with that, I only ask that if there is a desire from Meaford to do a municipal housing development to create affordable housing where houses are sold at or below $341,000, that my delegation be referred to staff for a report, and we could dive into some of the details. As I mentioned, this is not the first time doing this, and given my experience, I think there's a very low probability that any municipalities will be doing anything anytime soon, uh, given the obstacles that we see in 2025 with limited land. We see the numbers just don't work. And so with that, I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Daniel, for a dose of reality there. Let's go around the horseshoe and see if people have some questions. Councillor Uhrig.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Daniel, for your presentation. Nice to have a lot of doom and gloom on a Monday, so they're real problems. I've got a couple of questions here from Councillor Forder, who wasn't here, and I'm going to again piggyback on it because I think they're relevant. The question I asked to Liz of the earlier presentation, one of the things in your presentation talked about for municipal participation, it would require, one thing is providing access to serviced or unserviced lands that are unavailable or that are available. So the reality is, as Liz pointed out, that a lot of the good of flat, green, nice available land is not available. Does your solution kind of offer innovative ways of taking advantage of those spaces that aren't necessarily ready to go and just nice and cleared and off you go?
Yeah, so I would say it comes back to what the contribution margin is on a house that you're selling for $341,000 when you have hard costs of $250,000, not even taking into account the carry-on warranty. How much money are we going to have to spend to rezone the land, service the land, and find a buyer? You're pretty much left with negative contribution margin once you've done that. So if you're interested in supporting municipal housing development, rezone the land for us already, service it with Infrastructure Ontario money, and then find a development partner like myself to come and pre-sell these for you. That's the only way to lower the risk here. But the red tape here, when it comes to, it's not just the land. There's all this red tape that needs to be cleared away before you could even start building, whether that's, zoning amendments, paving roads, extending municipal water and sewage. Those are incredibly costly, and developers don't want to take that on when there's no, when I do these presentations, I'm building in a 7% profit margin, which is basically how I get paid on these projects. And even with that, the industry standard is minimum 20%. And my hope here is that that lowers the threshold and increases the potential houses that I could build here. But at the end of the day, I'm not willing to take on all the other risks involved in a project for basically what amounts to a social benefit that doesn't put food on the table for my family. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you, Daniel. And yes, no, that makes perfect sense. We know the obstacles, obviously, from a cost standard from our perspective, which is, I'm going to harken back to Councillor Forder's questions, and he had kind of three that dovetail into one. And I'm not sure, Alex will say whether we can cross-pollinate with Liz from the county on this, because it does dovetail into the previous presentation. Because he did say, what's the estimated cost of providing municipal infrastructure, roads, drainage, utilities? And again, of course, if you're infilling, then some of that infrastructure is already there. But obviously, he said, if the Meaford doesn't have the budgetary capacity to fund those commitments, how can this be overcome? And to that, he said, can we explore cost-sharing mechanisms or funding opportunities with the county or province? And again, obviously, we always want to lean into the province, but they're reticent to be helpful. Whether the county is capable of doing something, I'm not sure to what level. That's why I said whether we can kind of get Liz's opinion on that or not. But yeah, the infrastructure costs are going to be paramount here to be involved in this. But hopefully, And that even hearkening beyond what just leaning on the county, but then what Marilyn has said about social cooperation to try and get funding to do that, to hopefully support that as well. So long-winded, let me get to that point. So what Marilyn has pointed out, some municipalities are working with NGOs and various entities to help get funding. Have you experienced that in other municipalities where beyond the municipality, there are individual groups that are getting together to help fund this and making it a trifecta to kind of make it happen?
Absolutely. But the fundamental problem is you need seed capital. So I'm working with different community land trusts, co-ops, to try to identify projects, help them with their pro formas, apply for funding. But even then, you need equity in the deal. You need at least 20% equity in the deal to do construction financing. And nobody has seed funding. A lot of if you do a search of all the community land trusts in Ontario, there's about 7. And I think 3 or 4 of them are brand new, like incorporated within the last year and a half. They don't have legacy financing here where they could just draw on money. And the CMHC is not giving it out, and the MMAH is hiding behind their wall of employees fundamentally. I don't know whether you've had a chance to go through their site and see how they're set up, but if you look at housing on the MMAH website, you'll find 51 different agencies responsible for housing, and not one of them, in my opinion, well, from my experiences, have actually come back to me with a solution despite giving them feedback, telling them exactly what they need to do, showing them viable plans, and not one of them, except for the press attaché for Councillor, forgot his name, starts with a C, got back to me. And from what I see from their perspective is they won't do anything until there's a new federal election on housing. But again, I don't mean to be overly pessimistic here, but I don't see the province being that helpful when it comes to helping these units to be created and being part of the solution instead of just answering emails.
Daniel, thank you very much for the time you've given us today and your information. And I especially appreciate your PowerPoint as well, because there's some interesting things that we can go back to as we try and noodle some of this information. So thank you again very much for participating today. And I'm going to call on our last presenter, Kate Russell, Community Catalyst, Our Story 2024, an update on Beaver Valley Destination Stewardship.
Fantastic. Thank you. Hi, everybody. So maybe we'll consider this comic relief. I don't know if that's appropriate. I'm here with my colleagues, Stacey Howe and Heather Reed from our core team. We did presentations last year, and when we presented to Greg Sauble Conservation Authority, we were reminded that we look at the Beaver River watershed, and we were reminded that the municipality Meaford has a piece of our watersheds and was requested to come and present to council. So here we are to tell you about our very busy year last year. And I'm just going to try and segue from the affordable housing piece to say we're talking about the destination that everyone wants to call home. So no wonder we have challenges with people wanting to live here because it's so beautiful here. So I guess I just hit this, do it? Fantastic. So you'll have this presentation. So I'm not going to read everything through, but that gives us a summary of our busy year this past year. And I'm just going to go quickly through this. Oh, I want to just time myself. So basically, we're setting our community table. So when you're talking about community tables, we could certainly convene a space around affordable housing to bring in a community. So we're creating a community of care for Beaver Valley Watershed through stewardship circles, special events, knowledge sharing, and connecting nonprofit groups to offer a voice for the natural environment. So this is our core team, and our mission is to endeavor to bring the host community, so all of the people within our watershed, together under a set of guiding principles. So through our relationships, we share responsibility for the holistic care of our home. So we see relationship before agenda. So we are really connecting within our communities with multiple groups. Our principles that we go by, these are the guiding, our North Stars, so to speak. So it's to see the whole picture, to protect the natural and cultural distinctiveness of our watershed, to support, it's funny, I can't hardly read it, to support our human and natural and ecosystems, to value quality over quantity, and to share responsibility across all sectors. So our impact over the past year, we've had 355 event attendees, over 3,600 people online, 40 plus community groups that we're involved with. We had three stewardship circles, 4 woods events that were sponsored by the Community Foundation Grey Bruce in partnership with Osprey Museum, and 5 of our core volunteers, including the 2 I have with us and myself. We went to Grossmorn Institute of Sustainable Tourism to learn more about how we can help our home. So in February, we started basically our first stewardship circle, and we did that with multiple groups. We call it speed dating. So we had different groups come in and present themselves on what they do in our community. And we also invited and had Grossmorn Institute of Sustainable Tourism people come as a familiarization tour to learn about our watershed, and we took them on a bus tour. And then the next day we had focus groups on in Rockland, where we invited people to come out and talk about their community, and we learned appreciative interviewing there. We also, that was when we presented to the Grey Sauble Conservation Authority, and we started to learn about sociocracy, which is a way of governing ourselves that's not hierarchical, it's more lateral. So in March, we held a stewardship circle about the aspiring geopark. I'm sure you've heard about, they're trying to make Georgian Bay a geopark under the UNESCO. And we also heard from the Niagara Escarpment Biosphere Network, which is the group that is did the report to maintain the UNESCO Biosphere Reserve designation for Niagara Escarpment. We heard from, you may know, Robert Bircher, local historian about Indigenous history. Later in that month, we attended the Two-Eyed Seeing and Ethical Space Conference in Six Nations to learn more about how we work well with our Indigenous communities. And we also we started meeting with the Beaver Valley Sustainable Tourism Project Partners, which is Grey Highlands, Town Blue Mountains, the county, and RTO7. Not sure how Meaford got left out of that one, but there you go. So in April, we had another stewardship circle where we talked about traffic. So having a stewardship circle about affordable housing would certainly be doable. And then we actually went to Grossmorn as a cluster where we learned asset-based community-led development. And while we were there for 4 days, we also we made lots of connections. We did in community. We practiced the tools that we were learning in a community called Cowhead, where we learned how this interaction really works and how we can collect information and stories from communities. And then we came back and immediately we attended the Sources of Knowledge Forum in Tobermory, which is has been going on for over I think that was the 14th year, which basically is a forum where they connect on Indigenous and tourism to bring the community together. And then we also presented as a community group to the Canadian Commission of UNESCO that was reviewing the biosphere designation for Niagara Escarpment. So that was a really great opportunity for us to show how when community comes together, we can actually protect our collective home. In June, we met again with the Sustainable Tourism Partners. We helped to clean up the Hogs Falls with our Indigenous partners, and we submitted a grant for a project that was actually successful and a project that we're working on in 2025. We call it Two-Eyes, which basically means tour workshops outdoors with ecological youth and energizes destination stewardship. So again, we're Indigenous led. We're being led by Indigenous culture. So then we started our woods events. So yes, we got our cultural assets from Grey Highlands, and then we started our woods events, which was, I love a good acronym. So this was workshops outdoors on destination stewardship. So first place we went to was in Feversham in August, and then we went, we just been doing a lot of networking through the summer. In September, we did the same thing in Collapore, and then we also went to the Feversham Fall Fair doing some outreach. In that same month, we also worked with the Grey Bruce Native Seed Bank at their orchard, and we did a tiny tree planting up at Naishnaming, which is former Cape Croker. And then this is just sort of a view of how we are taking a new look at tourism, because in destination stewardship, tourism is based on a beautiful place to live is a beautiful place to visit. So it's all about the community leading tourism. So those are just some of our homework assignments, and there's us in Newfoundland again. In October, we started doing some one of our participants went back to New Brunswick to meet with GMIS, and then we started doing some online training around sustainable tourism for DMOs. And I participated in a grants panel to teach people. I'm a grant writer, so I help people do that. So in November, I took a story mapping course, which we'll be informing our new website coming up this year. We did GMIS Connects, which is about the leaky bucket tool, which shows where money comes in and goes out of your community. We started working with the Watershed Event Steering Committee. There's gonna be a watershed event later this year. And in December, we held our final stewardship circle for the year, which was a landowner event, which went over some of the tools that our Aki Guardians, our Indigenous partners, are able to bring to landowners to show how they can build stewardship plans for their own property. And at that meeting, I also did this presentation. So our ask today is basically to invite you to an upcoming stewardship circle. We're working with the watershed volunteers around having a Watershed Matters series. So the first one, you will have received an email invitation about this, is on February 16th, coming up in Markdale. And the topic of that will be around stormwater management, because currently Markdale has an issue where they're potentially looking at piping water into the Class A Rocky Saugeen, which is a cold water stream. So we're hoping that we can convince them otherwise and find alternatives to doing that, or at least to seek better integration before just putting warm water directly into a cold water stream. And then we ask that you save the date, because the watershed event will be happening in June at the Marsh Street Center. And we just want to thank all of our partners and collaborators from this year. So Grey Bruce, or the Community Foundation of Grey Bruce, gave us funding. The Osprey Museum was our sponsor. They're the qualified donee. Boggadawat Alliance is our Indigenous collaborator. Kalapur Wilderness Trails and Grey Bruce Native Seed Bank were both locations for our woods events, and the Gross Mourne Institute for Sustainable Tourism. And I will also mention, they're not up there, but the Cody Institute at St. Xavier in Antigonish was also instrumental in our work this year. So we're not here to ask for money. We're just here to tell you that there's people in your community doing good work. And we ask that Meaford keep us in mind when it comes to anything you want to do around, let us know. We could boost your signal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Really, really glad you're not asking for money.
That seems to be the uniqueness of our presentation.
Councillor Urick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That was less comic relief, more breath of fresh air.
Okay, there you go. Thank you.
Thank you. You obviously are passionate about what you do, and you can tell. Councillor Bell and myself for Grace Alba Conservation Authority, we enjoyed your presentation first time around. Beaver Valley does dovetail and is a gateway into our lovely municipality, so we felt it was kind of important to hear that messaging. And yeah, I think we should definitely be supporting you. I just wonder, and Robert Bircher as well, he's a local treasure of ours.
He sure is.
Really, really on top of this kind of stuff. Just wondering, kind of, with the Growing Our Economy committee, I'm also chair of that, and I'm just wondering how we can kind of dovetail kind of things there as well. Just again, it's a confluence of things that we're all trying to strive the same thing. It kind of feeds in economic development, does kind of promote our own resources. So I think I would like to try and we're right now hiring a new CAO. We're kind of in a flux in terms of our staff and what our economic development department is going to look like and who's going to be where. But when that comes to fruition, I think we should definitely have them kind of in contact with you so that Meaford could definitely participate in these kinds of things.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Councillor.
Okay, thank you again for your presentation.
I fear all ready for break.
Sorry, I beg your pardon, Councillor Greenfield. You got to get that hand up higher than your screen.
Thank you for the presentation. I read with great interest. I see a lot of place names in kind of in our area. Certainly Beaver Valley, which town of Blue Mountains, comes up, Gray Highlands, you mentioned. I think if we are talking Beaver Valley, we have to remember that, our municipality does have two creeks that I know of that end up in the Beaver River. And one is Greer Creek, which starts up in the Oakdale Road area and flows eastward. And then there's another creek which starts up just west of the town line, up near side road 7, and ends up eventually in the Beaver River.
Is that the Little Beaver, I think?
I guess it is.
I was looking at a map this
I
morning,
yeah,
so
I
I think
recognize the name, but hate to admit it, I haven't really, but anyway. So I'm hoping, I guess what I'm hoping for in the future is that our municipality can be more involved in what you folks are doing, because I think it's exciting, it's interesting. I'm hoping first and foremost you're involved in preservation of our beautiful area, and then certainly, yes, economic development. There has to be a component. There's no doubt about it. And so I appreciate you coming. I must admit, I didn't know a lot about you folks. I know a little bit more now, and
we're small and
hopefully,
mighty.
to learn a lot more in the future.
Thank you so much. And I will say that the watershed event is going to cover a much larger area. So it was going to go over into Nottawasaga and over into Sydenham as well. So we're looking sort of at the southern shore of Nottawasaga Bay for that area that we're covering for the watershed event, which will be in June. And certainly we may look at things as watershed based. But for instance, the February 16th is Rocky Saugeen, which is the Saugeen Valley Conservation Authority, different watershed, but we're still concerned because it's water. So, and we're not anti-development, we're pro-destination.
So certainly the Big Head River is
I've
on
fished it,
radar
yeah.
screen.
Oh, for sure, definitely on our radar.
And our municipality has a lot of creeks.
Don't we all?
Which gives rise to a lot of bridges, which gives rise to a lot of budget talks. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Kate, again, and your entourage.
I appreciate your time this morning. Thank you.
We have no deputations today, nor public questions, council inquiries. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I do have one. And Tori, it's really wonderful to see you with us today. And I'm not sure if you have an answer for this, so don't feel badly if you don't, because I didn't know you were coming, didn't give you any heads up. But I'm just curious. We had 412 Miller Street subdivision on our past agenda. And in that report, it doesn't really say where the services will come up through. So I'm just wondering if by chance you're familiar with that, or if you know if those services would be potentially coming up the Miller Street Hill, or how they might get to 412 Miller Street.
Through your worship. I don't know a recent information on this, as I haven't been involved. Right now I'm primarily only working on the asset management plan, as I am still off. But I do know, and I assume we're probably still at a similar point. We have looked at different options and have worked with the developer on it. So I don't know if one has been decided, but one of the option was looking at going up Miller Street, and there were other options continuing down Nelson Street. So there were different reasons why some were preferred, but as that development continues, I assume one will be selected, and I assume one probably has not yet, just based on where it probably is at, but Val might know more. Okay, yeah, no, so they'll continue to look at the different options and determine what is best for both the development and for our municipality.
Any other questions from council? Seeing none, let's move on. The consent agenda. We have a recommendation here. I'll ask for a mover and seconder that Council of the Municipality of Meaford adopt the 2024 Asset Management Plan for non-core infrastructure. Moved by Councillor Yurick and seconded by Councillor Bell. Thank you. Discussion on this? There are questions, Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Tori, this is asset management. So last council meeting, I asked and we weren't sure about the leased vehicles, if they are accounted for in this tally or if they were not. I just wondered if you knew where we stood on the leased vehicles as they relate to the asset management plan.
Through your worship, I'm happy to provide an answer to this. So I have followed up with our consultant on it following our last meeting. They are not included in the numbers in our asset management as they are not an owned asset. But as we continue into the 2025 asset management plan, I think we will make sure we work with the consultant to figure out how we can at least represent them somewhere. They are going to be updating their report to at least identify that they aren't included in the numbers so that we know that as we read through it. But we'll continue to look at those and see how we can incorporate them into the 2025 asset management plan, which will be more encompassing as it will include all of our assets and it will show levels of service. So that's where we can kind of look to include them in some way or figure out how we can look at those in the numbers.
Nice that the accountants have to work on their own job for a change. Did you have another one? I'm sorry, or a follow-up?
No, Mr. Mayor, thank you. No, I just wanted to say to Tori, I appreciate that because it seems to me, whether they're in or whether they're out, that kind of skews the, the outlook on our assets in terms of fleet. So to have them acknowledged and factored in somehow just seems to make sense.
Through your worship, and I understand the asset management perspective and where the consultant is like coming from and their direction on it. So from an finance perspective, they aren't identified as a capital asset because we lease them. And so that's why at this level in the asset management planning, they aren't included. But I think there very much is a capability for us to understand how they do incorporate into our asset management plan, because if we weren't leasing them, we would have to own them. But there is some interesting ways that finance looks at things that might not seem obvious from outside of that. So I think there's ways that we can kind of look at both the finance perspective of it, but also incorporate that other perspective and include those assets so we're not forgetting things or we're not at some point looking at them. So I'm hoping like we can work with them in 2025. Yeah, in 2025 with the asset management plan. And as we go forward, we'll look at how we can include them and maybe it's a separate portion of the report or somewhere else or in a different way. But I do agree with you. I think it's important that we don't just forget about them because if we did own them, they would be assets and when we need them, right? So yeah, so it's just kind of a difference between how our finances work and how things are recorded and required to be recorded and how, you look at it holistically. So we'll look at kind of how we can put it all together.
Any other questions? Councillor Greenfield.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Victoria. First of all, I want to say that I don't find this report really all that alarming. There's no doubt about it. We could be spending more money in more places, but I think overall it's a pretty decent report. The one I'm a bit concerned about is I think it's on page 212 of the Watson report, and it mentions Meaford Fire Services and the Inner Township Fire Department. The fleet and equipment there, in both cases they're only listed as fair, and I was a little worried about that because fire and not just fire suppression, but the fact that these folks go quite often to motor vehicle collisions, accidents, and so on and so forth. Should we be a little bit alarmed about the fact that they're only coming up fair. I guess I wondered if the new ladder truck was already included in this evaluation or if it's over and if it's still outside of this. Can you give me an opinion on that fair ranking?
Through your worship, I would be happy to. So first of all, the new ladder truck is not included because it wouldn't have been included in the inventory when we provided the information for this report. As well, right now, for the ratings, we're using an age-based rating for our fire assets. And the age that we've identified is not when you would think that the item would fail, maybe if you were using it at your house or somewhere else. It's the age at which we as a municipality and as the fire industry has identified, you should no longer use this for this asset past this point for that type of use. So for firefighting. And so that means that it still might be functional, but for their use, they can no longer use it and then get rid of it and sometimes sell it off for other people to use or repurpose it in a different area. But it's always in working condition for their needs. So the fact that it's considered fair, it just means that it's fair within the range that's acceptable to the fire team, but that asset might still be in good condition for other uses. Does that make sense? Yeah, no
I'm
problem.
wondering if the old Bickle Maple Leaf was bringing down our score.
Councillor Yurg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So that's good. Just curiosity, the last statement you made there, this is just about in terms of when we do have assets that are at that age where they're practically, we're saying practically end of life. We end up flipping those to somebody else, and you literally said they could go to somewhere else that they can use. How are they using fire department that is also considered end of life?
Through your worship, so they would be items that potentially aren't being used by a fire department. They might be utilized by someone else. So like they could resell vehicles or different things that maybe can be used in a different way, but not by necessarily, or they could be used for training or different reasons. Granted, some fire departments maybe have different, like they would do work on a vehicle to get it back up to what they need. I don't know. I know we have gotten vehicles that have been used. So, clearly we found that we were able to continue to utilize it past what a different department maybe found they weren't. So I think there's different ways that things can be used. Fire is very specific about how long things can be used for. There's very specific regulation. So it's very different than a lot of the other assets when you look at the very good, fair, like a lot of our assets in this report, when it says it's in fair condition, it's in what we would all consider would be fair condition, but the fire ones in particular, it's fair in that range of what's an acceptable age for the asset for firefighting purposes, because they have to be functioning at 100% at all times. We can't have failures because of the risks associated with it. So those fire assets in particular, that range is definitely a lot smaller. So having them identified as fair is not necessarily concerning. It just means that they will be getting to that point where we have identified that they're no longer useful to us, and then we would be moving them on and buying new assets.
Okay, can I call the question at this point? All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Next, items for consideration. The recommendation is be it resolved that bylaw 2025-06, being a bylaw to deem Lot 8, Registered Plan 349, not to be a lot within a plan of subdivision, be taken as read a first, second, and third time, and finally passed. Mover and seconder, Deputy Mayor and Councillor Greenfield. Any discussion of this? I think we all understand it. And are you ready to vote? All in favor? And that is carried. Now I need a motion to go into committee of the whole. Deputy Mayor and Councillor Greenfield. And that's at 2:28 p.m. We didn't have a county council meeting, so I don't believe we have a report, do we?
That would be correct, Mr. Mayor. We meet this Thursday.
Is there any other committees that, Councillor Yurg, do you have a report?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Growing Our Economy Committee did meet on January 30th. And we actually do have a couple of recommendations, so they're going to be next you will be seeing, but just a bit of an overview. That committee's mandate is to celebrate diversity and culture while also actively supporting all persons across their life life courses and circumstances. So we ended up having a pretty fulsome discussion about kind of what could be done from an ECDEV scenario to from the municipal perspective. So if you want me to jump right into the recommendations.
Yeah, I think that's another mover and seconder. No?
No.
Oh, okay.
Nope, these are just
Sorry.
recommendations, so they're not really edicts, so. One, so whereas Lisa Thompson, Ontario Minister of Rural Affairs, recently announced an increase in the Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund over 2 years, and whereas an immediate increase be targeted to small northern and rural municipalities with a limited tax base, and whereas one of the goals of the program is to support business development and attraction through the Business Retention and Expansion, or BR&E plus D tool, and whereas the municipality of Meaford has not undertaken the completion of a BR&E study since early 2000, now therefore be it resolved that the Growing Our Economy Advisory Committee recommends to Council that an application be considered, and further, if the application for the grant is successful, that members of the Growing Our Economy Advisory Committee participate in the study. So that was the one recommendation. Don't know if we have any questions regarding that.
Any comments? Okay.
I do know that Mr. Forder did have a question on that. He asked how the study results be used to create tangible business support initiatives in Meaford and what other funding opportunities, i.e. council, federal, could supplement this application if OPMF funding is sufficient. The only thing I'll kind of say to Brandon on that is that OPMF fund, one of the things they did designate was some of that funding could be used for infrastructure. So that could therefore be utilized for the municipality to help in kind of supporting local businesses from a cost perspective of something we could be doing to improve infrastructure for them.
Okay, I guess my question is, with this vote, this sounds to me rather like a budget issue, and we're sort of alongside of what we're doing today, we're going through a budgetary process, and I'm wondering if it's appropriate that we make a budgetary decision in this particular meeting as opposed to during the budget meetings. Deputy Mayor, do you have?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My understanding of the BR&E grant is that this, if we were successful, would be fully funded. There's $10 million available for these studies. Having been around the Chamber of Commerce when this was done many years ago, the funding was sufficient enough to allow the chamber at that point in time to hire an individual to undertake the work of creating the BR&E for Meaford, and it was an incredibly valuable tool. Almost all businesses were interviewed, and that information was collated to understand how we could help as a municipality, help and support our businesses, and just overarchingly what kind of was working in the municipality and what wasn't from the perspective of the businesses. So it is incredibly valuable. I think we saw the overview from Southgate in our Growing Our Economy committee meeting, and that information I know we all felt was really well done, and we could see the value of that, and we would really like to see this go forward in Meaford. So I suspect that the staff that we have currently in the municipality, I know that they're watching the website to see when this grant comes available, and I'm sure that they'll get their application in. And I think it will be very helpful to know that they have council's support in going after that funding.
Well, Councillor Bell.
Thank you. It's nice to see that one of the advisory committees has been working and bringing more consideration to council. I mean, that's what they're all about. This one here just basically says that to consider putting forward an application. If we don't do that, we won't get it, so we should do that. And I see that they also recommend that if it goes through, that they continue to be involved and to participate in that study. So on this particular item, I think that we should take up the folks that work on that advisory committee and support them by trying to move forward by doing an application.
Call the question then, all in favor?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, it's not on the table for council to vote. This is part of Councillor Urig's report on the committee. So we have to follow the proper steps if this is to be considered by council. So today we would need a notice of motion from a councillor that would like to move this along. Right now, this is just a report.
Gotcha. Correct. So do we have a mover for bringing this to the next stage?
Sorry, I think what we should do in this situation is let's let Councillor Urig finish his report on the committee because he has another recommendation. Then once we get into the notice of motion section in the agenda, a councillor can bring notice regarding these recommendations.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Okay.
It's crystal clear now this time. So continue, Councillor.
Thank you. And thank you, Shirley and Tony, both for comments, because realistically, we haven't had a BRNE since 2000. So literally 25 years. I'm presuming things have changed a little bit in the community, and things have changed a little bit in the economy and environment in general. So it is long overdue. There was a second recommendation. I'll read that. Whereas the municipality of Meaford has a significant reliance on community events for the tourism component of economic development, and whereas the municipality of Meaford has in excess of 76 volunteer events and organizations, and whereas the municipality of Meaford has a loyal, capable, and dedicated volunteer base, and whereas the municipality of Meaford has an opportunity to facilitate, nurture, and collaborate with the volunteer organizations to maximize the economic impact of the event, and whereas an event staff member would facilitate and provide timely arrangements for the municipal resources required for the event, now therefore be it resolved that the Growing Our Economy Advisory Committee recommend to council that the municipality of Meaford consider allocating the necessary budgetary resources for a permanent community engagement coordinator. Thank you.
Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and to the clerk. Is it appropriate for members of council to make a comment on the report that fellow Councillor Urig has brought forward? Because I would think you may be thinking of doing a notice of motion to bring this forward. Would we have the ability to make comment? So when the notice of motion is being formulated, that he would have some background comment? Can we make comment on that?
If I may, Mr. Mayor, through you, yes, this section of the agenda, councillors are able to make comments on any of the reports. So even when Deputy Mayor gives her report on Grey County, councillors can ask questions. So you can ask at this time about this particular meeting that Councillor Urig is giving a report on, if that makes sense. And then again, even the notice of motion section of the agenda, if a councillor wants to speak up, you totally can as well. Until this is actually formulated as a motion brought forward by a councillor and seconded, and then there's comments and then it's voted on, that's when it's actually considered. But you're able to ask a question or comment at any time.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank
Okay.
you for that. So knowing that, I would just think that possibly in your pulling together your notice of motion, that not necessarily having a director of engagement, this to me really looks a lot like you know, your economic development team. And I can support that movement on that. So if you give some thoughts to how you would pull that recommendation together, I think it does tie in very nice. And again, that working group has been thinking on it. And anyway, I'll just leave it at that. And thank you, Alex, for your input.
Sorry, were you first, Deputy Mayor? Did you have your hand up as well? I thought I saw your hand first.
Not yet.
No, okay, Councillor Greenfield.
Thanks, Mayor Kentner. Yeah, I certainly appreciate the strengthening our community committee, bringing forward the suggestion. I would think the only appropriate notice of motion would be to have on the table, for the possibility of hiring this employee included in our budget deliberations. I think that's where it should be discussed. We've still, as far as I'm concerned, got a long way to go with our budget deliberations. I don't feel we are at a palatable number as far as budgeting is concerned, and I don't want to give too much of an indication for a preference for future employee.
Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and following up on Councillor Greenfield's comments, if we think about timing and our next budget day to have discussion on this matter, if this goes to a notice of motion, we won't see it for 2 weeks, and that's after our next full budget day. So I'm inclined to suggest that we move this forward to a budget enhancement on Friday and have conversation at that point and see then if council's all in agreement. But I just wanted to comment on, the number of events that were held last year for the sesquicentennial and how valuable the support was from the person on staff, supporting events. It's really been worthwhile. So I think I'll leave my comments there until we have opportunity to discuss on Friday.
Councillor Urick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And yes, thank you all for comments because they're all absolutely correct. And Harley, you're absolutely right. The reason this was brought forth now was because we felt that if we couldn't wait to talk about the desire for this till after the budget talks, then the baby was up with the bathwater. So we felt we wanted to at least bring it to the attention of council now so that it could be discussed at budgetary talks. The other thing that obviously, and it was discussed at the growing economy meeting as well. I mean, once again, I mentioned it earlier during one of the presentations that we are at a bit of an unfortunate scenario here because we're pre-new CAO still. So we don't even really know yet what that structure is going to look like from an economic development perspective and what that department, if it exists, what it might look like. However, the committee felt that it was important enough to mention that this does contribute greatly to the success of something that contributes to economic development and tourism in the community, and it should be at least considered during the budgetary talks. So hence, that's why it's coming forward now.
Okay. So I believe at this point, we should just move out of the committee of the whole and move on. So I'll ask for a mover and a seconder to move out of committee of the whole, the Deputy Mayor and Councillor Greenfield. All in favor? And that's at 3:42 p.m. 2:42 p.m. Sorry. Now notices of motion. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I do have a notice of motion, which will request that staff develop a bylaw of general application to major proposals in order to engage our residents and to study the proposals, community impacts and benefits. And that motion will be on our next agenda.
Thank you very much. Motion for decision, Councillor Urick, sorry. Sorry.
Sorry, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Notice of motion as well. Again, adjacent to the recommendations I just made, I would make I'll make a notice of motion that I will be bringing forth the request for the BRE study at the next council meeting.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, if I may. I just wanted to clarify for that second piece about the community engagement coordinator. Are we also addressing that today as well? So we get it before Friday, or I just wanted to put it out there one last time.
Yeah, so my question is, so to the point was, even if I did bring a notice of motion right now to it, it would not actually hit till council meeting 2 weeks, which is after our next budget day, at which we're planning to talk greatly about kind of structure. So again, this was as much about, I can bring a notice of motion to address this, although I'm almost reticent to do that until we actually have the budgetary conversations about where we might think this might land. And again, we're gonna have a follow conversation shortly about CAO and what that's going to do. So I want to make this aware and I want to be part of the conversation on Friday, but I'm not sure I'm quite ready to make a notice of motion on it because there are a lot of moving parts to this that are going to impact it.
Okay, I was just speaking to Val, if I may, through you, Mr. Mayor. So council can waive the procedural bylaw. We've done that before. So if you wanted to wait, we would need two motions, a motion to waive the procedural bylaw and a motion to consider the community engagement coordinator today. And I think given the timing of our budget meeting on Friday, it makes sense. And I think Val, it makes sense for her purposes as well. She just confirmed. So if this is something you would like as part of Friday, we can do that. But if it's sort of to your other point, there's too much going on, push it off. It's totally up to you. I just wanted to also offer that as another piece.
Thank you. Yeah, I have zero problem in bringing it forth so that it would be part of the conversation. To Councillor Bell's point, this could be represented as an enhancement at Friday's meeting. So
And
yeah,
anything we can do to help Val is, I'm all in favor of. I think we all are. So if it works for you, Val, that's good. If it helps.
So, Mr. Mayor, do you need my help with sort of how we format this? Or are you okay to just sort of take it away?
You go ahead and form it.
Okay, so first we need a motion to waive the procedural bylaw.
Is there a mover for that?
Yeah, so mover and seconder for that.
Councillor Urick, and it's seconded by Deputy Mayor.
Any discussion about waiving the procedural bylaw?
All
Okay.
in favor? Okay, all in favor?
Okay,
Fine.
perfect. So then we will need are you making any changes to the recommendation from the committee or are you using that as your motion?
I think the only thing I would change is to say in the last paragraph, so in the actual resolution, recommend to council the municipality of Meaford consider allocating the necessary budget resources for a permanent community engagement coordinator. It'd be considered as a enhancement the budget meeting,
Yep.
budget discussion.
Okay. Does council want to see that up on the screen or do you want to read it? Or is everyone okay?
I can read it if you like.
Yes, just Councillor Urick added something to
Yes,
the end.
Now therefore be it resolved that the Growing Our Economy Advisory Committee recommend to council that the municipality of Meaford consider allocating the necessary budgetary resources for a permanent community engagement coordinator as an enhancement in the budget.
Yeah, we'll have to change that to therefore be resolved that council of the municipality of Meaford consider allocating the necessary budgetary resources for a permanent community engagement coordinator and be considered as an enhancement to the draft 2025 budget deliberations. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Yep, okay. So any discussion before we vote? Oh, thank you. Yep, you're right. We need a seconder.
Seconder for that motion then, Deputy Mayor, and all in favor.
Oh, any discussion? Did you have any discussion?
Can I just ask a quick question? So for Friday, then you're looking for the costs associated with that?
Yes, and we're not getting into deliberations already, but
No, just-
no, I know, but it occurs to me as well that there's two things we can do here as well. One, we can allocate the necessary resources for permanent. That's what we're saying. I mean, we can also come Friday, have the conversation whether this is just another temporary position until we have the CAO in place to determine what the ACDEV scenario is going to flush out like. So, like I said, I don't want to muddy this, but that's going to be part of the conversation on Friday. So right now it's a contract position. I would maybe say that you bring two things. One, what would a permanent position look like? What would the salary be?
Mhm.
But also if we were to extend the contract, what does that look like?
Sure. Okay,
I went from making your life easier to not.
Okay, I'll call the vote. All in favor? And that's carried. Not unanimously, but carried. So I'm in a bit of a dilemma. Did we speak about the hybrid meetings? No. How did I manage to get uh, B and D ahead of A? Cart before the horse. I don't know how I did that. Okay, then we need to move out of, we've moved out of committee of the whole, so dealing with the first motion, and this is on hybrid meetings, so we need a mover and seconder? Or is this
You could turn it
again?
over to Counselor Yuri because it's his motion, so he's moving it. We'll just need a seconder and then
Okay.
Counselor Yuri can read the motion.
Okay,
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, we were already on the committee of the whole, so you went to notice the motions were, I think, where we should be. So the recommendation is, whereas the municipality of Meaford is committed to increasing transparency, accessibility, and public engagement in its council and committee meetings, and whereas hybrid meetings, combining both in-person and virtual attendance of members, would allow greater participation, especially in cases of unforeseen circumstances, such as weather, health concerns, or other barriers to physical attendance. And whereas other municipalities have successfully implemented hybrid meeting options to enhance participation of members, therefore be it resolved that the Council of the Municipality of Meaford directs staff to prepare a feasibility report on the implementation of hybrid meeting participation for council and committee meetings, which includes the following components. 1, costs. An estimate of the costs involved in implementing and maintaining hybrid meeting technology, including any necessary equipment, software, and ongoing operational expenses. 2, operational considerations. A review of the operational requirements to facilitate hybrid meetings, such as staffing, technology support, and potential impacts on meeting logistics. 3, training. The training components that would need to be implemented for chairs who are facilitating hybrid meetings. 4, procedural bylaw updates. Recommendations on any amendments required to the procedural bylaw to accommodate hybrid meeting participation, including rules for virtual attendance, quorum, and voting. 5, security and accessibility. A review of measures to ensure the security and accessibility of hybrid meetings, including protecting against disruptions and ensuring accessibility for all participants.
so yeah, yeah, were you, thank you, Councillor Bell. Discussion or questions for Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Urick, for bringing this forward. This is certainly something that we've heard about from committee members, particularly this term. I think it comes up every time we meet at PSAC. And I think it will be interesting to understand what the impacts will be if it's possible. We've often heard that we don't have the capability here at Chambers internet-wise to make this happen. So understanding what that additional expense would be will be really interesting. And then we can make a determination as to, whether or not that's feasible. It will make life a little trickier, I'll say, for our mayor or whomever is in that chair, learning to keep track of who's present and who's online. But like all things, I'm sure whoever is in the mayor's chair or the mayor will adapt and get used to it, and it will allow for greater participation. And I assume as well for presentations. We had our second presentation today, Daniel Siegel. We weren't able to see him. It's always nice to be able to put a face to the voice that we're hearing. So there's lots of advantages to this if we can do it feasibly.
I'd just like to go on record. I've chaired 1 or 2 meetings like that. And it's just, I think some training would be valuable, but it's not that it's that heroic an effort. And the thing I see is we have so many weather. I wonder how kids are going to graduate their grades this year. How many snow days have they had? I mean, it's horrendous. And in our case, every meeting we're trying to move forward, and I just think that I personally would favor having the capacity to do it, and it can always be council's decision whether or not to go forward with a meeting on that basis. But I think that having the capacity, I'm sure that going forward, it will be much more common than it already is. Councillor Yuri?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Deputy Mayor, because you're absolutely right. It's, although I will say I chair the Grace Harbor Conservation Authority, without fail, every meeting, there are at least a couple people that are participating virtually. So yes, there is a bit of a bit of a learning curve, but realistically, it does enable more participation. And to Shirley's point, yes, our growing advisory, I'm sure that every advisory committee is saying, well, isn't it a shame because we can't participate when the public cannot be there, and they may be weather, health, a number of reasons, vacation, it could be a number of reasons, but they can still participate. So there is inherent value in it.
Councillor Bell?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Urick, for this. I've always disliked computer people. Just, no, just they're off somewhere. And you know, Councillor Urick, you said about, you know, Grace Harbor. We've seen people just, they're on the screen and you're looking to see if they're there, and then they get up and they go away and they come back with a coffee and they come back in and then somebody goes behind the screen right from their house and their cat and anything else that they've got going on. And just to me, I really dislike that. And I'll tell you, I really disliked during COVID. We had technical issues. There was times when I couldn't be heard or my screen would freeze. And I just got to the point that I just went, I'm out, and I quit. Maybe that was a lack of technical training on my part, which you've said there needs to be some training. And go with that, but you know, I don't want to really see as we put this together that it just gives more leniency for council members simply not to show up at this horseshoe. I think that our people in this area, they expect us to try. Now, you said about weather. Well, I'll go with that. A couple of council meetings ago, I didn't participate. So we've often talked about how we communicate with people in the rural community. I don't have internet at home. I just don't. The television from, you know, Shaw, I don't have computers, so I'd have to go back to my place of business and hook into that. But we'd made a decision on that we're heading home. And I know there's been a few times, Councillor Urick, you've been very good at getting in on some meetings just by means of telephone, and you've done that. So maybe it's the area for a councillor like myself where I just need more training to feel more comfortable doing it. But I've often looked at when we're at that board of directors where you are now the current chair, I have found that to be so, well, they got their little hand up and the little flags flying and oh, you're going to give them a moment and they doing this. And then it makes for a different level of engagement. It really does. And I don't find it as smooth. And maybe that's just because I'm in a lot of my thinking, I'm kind of old school on some stuff, you know? So you got to give me a little bit of a break on that aspect of things. But I can see this being put to staff and I can see us getting a report back. But today I at least want to be a voice that says that I'm not very comfortable as far as our ratepayers having access and watching and streaming and looking at what we're doing. 100%. That's they're able to do that and tune in. I just don't want to see that it's a bit of an escape for members of council, and just all of a sudden we have a meeting and it's Mr. Mayor all by himself and no one else. That would be a tough gig, I think. So I hope you've taken what I'm saying kind of lightly, but I hope you take into consideration from staff's aspect what it can be like. And maybe somebody will come up to me after and say, Tony, you got to get internet out at your house out there.
During COVID, I believe that the Prime Minister ran the meetings all by his lonesome from his dwelling. But anyway, Councillor Greenfield.
Thanks, Mayor Kentner. I think Councillor Bell has summed up most of my my feelings in a similar manner that I would present. I've never been a big fan of virtual. We had a council meeting recently that was virtual, and I know I ended up with no video. Now, I don't think anybody complained about not looking at me, so I didn't hear any of that. But even my audio was not good. And as a matter of fact, thanks to our acting clerk, we have a meeting coming up with Grey County in the fairly near future, and I have asked to join it virtually. I will be at the Meaford Public Library because perhaps there's something something faulty with my connection. I don't. I have a small credit with Bruce Telecom, so I don't think that's the problem. But anyway, the main reason I will vote in favor of this is when I think of the members of the Accessibility Committee. We have currently two gentlemen who are challenged physically, and it can be problematic for them to get here to this building. Now, I hate to base the whole notice of motion on one committee, but that's a place where I can see virtual attendance for them could be advantageous. I think again, and I think they've both said they want to get here, they want to be here in person, but it is a little more difficult for them. So yeah, anyway, I'll vote in favor of the staff report. It's going to be interesting. I'm a little bit worried about closed session, how that could be handled, if that maybe throws another factor into this situation. But we'll go from there.
Councillor Yuri.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Tony and Harley. I totally appreciate it. To your point, yeah, the people that kind of wander around and do whatever, I'm not terribly happy with that either, but I've watched neighboring municipality council meetings where I've seen people practically sleeping in the chairs. So just because you're present doesn't mean you're present. So there are a bit of everything. To the point, Brandon had chimed in on this one as well. I just wanted to get his comments in because he said he supported it wholeheartedly because again, he's also very computer literate, but he just said he's not here to attend, he can't vote. This is a perfect example why they need to be there, because he would want to be. I can tell you in my former employment, I used to take part in board meetings from Europe. So it's the matter of allowing the people that want to participate. The ones that don't want to take advantage, that's on them.
Yes. And another point here is I don't really know whether you're affected by this or not, Councillor Bell, but right now there's a project underway to connect people to reliable internet in the former Sydenham Township. And that project has sort of ground to a halt, but it's supposed to be done by, I think, the end of this calendar year. And so I'm sure that it will get on the rails at some time. And clearly, I think by the sound of what you were describing during COVID, it would have been a connectivity issue that was plaguing you, and it wouldn't have been your fault. So I think that it's critically important that we get everybody online. So I'm going to call the vote. All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you very much. And Councillor Greenfield, you have a one to bring forward as well?
Yes, thanks again, your worship. Yes, this is a notice of motion that, initially, was suggested by Councillor Bartley, who was not able to attend today. It's fairly lengthy, but I do want to read it through, because in my evaluation has changed somewhat from what Councillor Bartley originally proposed, but it involves the Beautiful Joe Park footbridge. Whereas Beautiful Joe Park, oh, I'm sorry, do we need
A seconder?
I'll move the motion.
Yep. And seconded by Deputy Mayor Keaveney.
Oh, okay. Whereas Beautiful Joe Park is a valuable community asset that promotes outdoor recreation, historical appreciation, and local tourism. And whereas the current accessibility to the park and its amenities could be significantly enhanced by the construction of a footbridge. And whereas the Beautiful Joe Heritage Society has expressed interest in supporting the development of this project to improve accessibility and enhance the park's overall user experience. And whereas the footbridge would not only improve pedestrian flow and safety, but also align with the municipality's broader goals of increasing accessibility and fostering community engagement. Therefore, be it resolved, the Council of the Municipality of Meaford directs staff to conduct a feasibility study and bring a report back to Council for the proposed Beautiful Joe Park footbridge, which should include, 1, a cost analysis, including estimates for construction, ongoing maintenance, and any necessary upgrades to ensure long-term sustainability. 2, a detailed assessment of the accessibility benefits, ensuring that the footbridge will meet the needs of people of all ages and abilities and comply with applicable accessibility standards. 3, options available for the municipality to enter into a funding agreement with the Beautiful Joe Heritage Society, outlining the financial responsibilities of both parties, including potential fundraising or grant opportunities and any partnerships that could support the project. Further, be it resolved that the feasibility study be presented to the council in the form of a staff report for further review and decision making.
Can we have a seconder for the motion? Oh, you did, sorry, okay. Discussion. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for bringing this forward, Councillor Greenfield, on Councillor Bartley's behalf. I know that the motion is requesting a cost analysis for the bridge itself, but I'm wondering, in terms of this report, what is the cost to the municipality to create this report? Is this something that has to go out for an engineer to evaluate, or will this be done in-house? I'm just want to know what the cost of this exercise is.
Through your worship, this would be similar to what we did when we did the Twin Bridge report. So it would take staff's time, but we would essentially go out for a quote, I think based on what my understanding of what you're looking for like a design build. As we know, there's very few companies that do that based on that report. So we'd look for something similar and provide a similar report, but it would be obviously for the bridge that's being discussed here. So there would be no cost from external parties at this point, because we'd be just looking at them to give us a quote, but would be very similar. I don't remember if you would recall around this time last year, we brought forward the staff brought forward the Twin Bridges report. It would be very similar, I assume, based on what is being asked for. And we would just be looking for quotes from those parties at this time, which don't have a cost associated with them.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So in follow-up to that, Tori, if I understood correctly, I thought Councillor Bartley was asking for a cost for the engineering, because when we had the presentation from the representatives of the Beautiful Joe Society, they indicated they had most of the money raised to construct the bridge, and they were just looking for the municipality to support the engineering side of things. So I'm just wondering how that request fits into the motion as it's presented.
Through your worship. So just looking back at what we did last year for that report, because again, this would be very similar. Essentially, what we would identify, depending on exactly what council is looking for, is probably a couple different options. So I know that the last meeting, that group identified that they had a quote from Algonquin Bridge, and again, that company provides the actual structure, but they do require the municipality to have an engineer do work before that they can get to the stage of providing that structure. So there would be additional costs that we would have to look at. And so we can either rely on some of the costing that we get on a regular basis for engineering, just like we do at the budgetary stage, where we would provide a budget estimate for it. It wouldn't be the exact cost associated with it, but it would be our best guess based on all of the projects that we do. But then some of them, like we did for the Twin Bridges and what we moved forward with there, it was one quote that covered everything. That company was able to provide all of the services. And so that was actually like a more wholesome quote that they were able to provide. So it could be a similar report, but yes, we would have to include different components to what would be required, because obviously there's not just the bridge structure itself, there's additional work that needs to happen. And I assume that there would be potential as well for environmental studies and things to be done as well. So all those things, we could provide our best guess at what those costs could be, similarly to what we have done in the past. So it would be a budget estimate.
Councillor Greenfield.
Thanks again, Your Worship. Well, I certainly agree with the notice of motion, and I wouldn't have offered to bring it forward had I not seen value in it. But I am curious, and I can't speak for Councillor Bartley, but is what I inferred from his original notice of motion was that he asked for permission to go and talk to an engineer who worked for a particular bridge company who's doing work for us at the present, and get some ideas of maybe what time. As I said, I'm in favor of the notice of motion, but I'm just wondering where this is going. The Beautiful Joe Society has been working for something like 12 years to raise funds for this bridge, and they're doing a great job. They have raised many thousands of dollars towards this, but I'm worried that this might end up augmenting the cost of a potential bridge. And I guess my second worry is that, is this going to become a municipal project, or is it still going to be a Friends of Beautiful Joe project? And I don't want to take away from their efforts in the past. I want to see the job done. I think it would be a great asset. But I'm just curious if anybody can help me out, I'd appreciate it.
Go ahead, Val.
Through your Mayor Kentner, the bridge will end up becoming ours, so they're basically providing funding for the bridge.
And Councillor Yuri.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Coincidentally, we had I'm on the committee with Councillor Bartley, strengthening our committee as a chair. So we had a meeting last week. Beautiful Joe presented at that. Again, the same presentation. We had a wholesome conversation about that. They're now up to 115,000 as of that meeting last week. But they recognize that the park is municipal. The bridge will be technically municipal, but you're right, there is a relationship they're looking to strike in terms of, and what this has said, whether grants or funding can be brought in for the footings, for the location, for the EAs, for if there's remaining cost on the actual bridge. So it is kind of a partnership with the understanding that it still is a municipal park but they are a body that we are trusting to kind of look after that on kind of our behalf and kind of be the carekeepers for it. So it is a little muddled. I just wanted also to say that's strengthening our community because we're always looking for input from the public, and the public advisory committees are set up to do exactly that. Parks and Rec does kind of fall under the strengthening our community, and they were overwhelmingly in favor of the municipality supporting and whatever it takes to kind of get this to fruition.
Any further discussion? I'll call the vote then. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. Next recommendation is to be it resolved that Council of the Municipality of Meaford hereby adopt the minutes of the council meetings held on January 27th, 2025. I need a mover and a seconder for that. Councillor Urick and Councillor Greenfield. All in favor? Sorry, you would like to raise something?
Yes, please. In the minutes, under item 4, disclosure of pecuniary interest, it states that I had no need to declare on appointing the interim chief administrative officer when that should have been the interim fire chief.
Thank you for that. I will correct that.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there anything? I guess we need to vote on that. All
Yes,
in
please.
favor? Thank you. Those are accepted. Anything on the communications list that anyone wants to raise? Anything on the correspondence list? Council Greenfield?
Thanks. I do have a question. The Riverside Community Hall Board. If I remember correctly, at one time, they had a representative from council on that board. And no, they haven't for the last few years, I don't think. I'm just wondering, like the Bodner Hall Board has a council rep, Mr. Bartley, and I just wonder, has anything changed that Riverside does not have a rep?
If I may, Mr. Mayor, through you, thank you for bringing that forward. My understanding, because I don't know for sure, but my understanding is that we have just started receiving the minutes from Riverside as of recently, as of last year, late last year. So I was looking into the appointment bylaws, and I think one still does need to come to council. I don't know off the top of my head. I'm not sure that a councillor was appointed to Riverside from, I'll have to look at the bylaw. I don't have it in front of me. So that is something I have to look into, and yes, they should have a councillor appointed now that we're sort of back in the loop with them. That's something that I'll try to bring to council in the coming weeks.
Yeah, thanks for raising that. Deputy Mayor?
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Alex, I just wanted to double check. I don't see it here. And I know you and I spoke about this. The letter relating to the Northeast Grey Health Clinics, that's not in this correspondence, is it? That'll be in the next group?
Correct. I'll put it on the next one.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we didn't miss it. Thank you.
Okay. We have a closed session next, and I just want to say we'll probably have a short recess following this part of the meeting, but I need a mover and a seconder for the recommendation. Be it resolved that Council of the Municipality of Meaford does now go into a closed session at 3:20 p.m. with the Director of Community Services and Human Resources, Treasurer/Director of Financial Services, and Acting Clerk in attendance to discuss personal matters about identifiable individuals, including municipal or local board employees, specifically relating to recruitment of a CAO. So a mover and a seconder, Councillor Urick and Councillor Bell. All in favor? And that is carried. So we will be back to report out of that closed session later this afternoon. Reporting out on council's closed session with the Director of Community Services and Human Resources, Treasurer, the Director of Financial Services, and Acting Clerk in attendance to discuss personal matters about identifiable individuals, including municipal or local board employees, specifically relating to recruitment of a CAO. Direction was given to staff with regards to CAO recruitment. And with that, that concludes our meeting for today.